I thought I was being clever when I joked that his brother would probably be better in bed. I laughed. He didn't. That same night, while I slept under the same roof, he proved his point, in my sister's bed. It happened 3 days ago, and I'm still reeling from the shock of it all. I keep replaying that moment over and over, wishing I could take back those stupid words that set everything in motion. But it's too late now. The damage is done, and I'm left picking up the pieces of my shattered life. That night started like any other. We'd had dinner together, the three of us, and were just lounging around the apartment. Emma was on her laptop, looking at apartment listings. Liam was watching some sports highlights on his phone, and I was scrolling through social media on the couch. The conversation somehow drifted to relationships and intimacy, the way it sometimes does when you're comfortable with people. Emma was talking about her ex and how their physical connection had never been quite right. She made some comment about how hard it was to find someone who was really compatible in every way. That's when Liam made some joke about how he'd never had any complaints in that department, giving me this cocky little smirk that usually would have made me laugh. But something about his tone rubbed me the wrong way. Maybe I was feeling defensive about Emma's situation, or maybe I was just in a mood to be contrary. We started playfully arguing about it, teasing each other the way couples do when they're being flirty, but also a little competitive. He was being particularly smug about his abilities, and I guess my pride got the better of me. I wanted to knock him down a peg, to wipe that self-satisfied expression off his face. So I said it. We were teasing each other, and I thought I was being funny when I told him that maybe his brother would be better in bed. I smirked, expecting him to roll his eyes, or make some comeback about how I'd never find out. The words hung in the air like poison gas, contaminating everything they touched. I immediately knew I'd gone too far, crossed a line that shouldn't have been crossed, but my pride wouldn't let me back down completely. Instead of a genuine apology, I just laughed nervously and said it was obviously a joke. But he didn't laugh. He didn't even speak. He just stared at me with this cold, unreadable expression that I'd never seen before. It was like looking at a stranger wearing Liam's face. The playful atmosphere in the room evaporated instantly, replaced by a tension so thick I could practically taste it. Emma looked mortified, her face flushing red as she realized what I'd just said. She tried to break the tension by making some awkward comment about sibling rivalry, but her voice came out shaky and uncertain. The damage was already done, and we all knew it. I immediately tried to backtrack, saying it was just a joke and that I didn't mean anything by it. I reached for Liam's hand, trying to reconnect with him physically since my words had clearly severed something between us. But he pulled away from my touch, the rejection stinging more than I wanted to admit. The worst part is that everyone who knows what happened thinks I got what I deserved. My friends are too polite to say it directly, but I can see it in their eyes when they look at me. The unspoken judgment that I brought this on myself, with my big mouth and cruel sense of humor. Maybe they're right. Maybe I did deserve exactly what I got. Liam and I had been together for 2 years, living together for the past 8 months. Things between us were good, or at least I thought they were. He was attentive, caring, and we had what I believed was a solid relationship built on trust and mutual respect. Sure, we had our occasional disagreements like any couple, but nothing that ever made me question whether we had a future together. He was the kind of boyfriend most women would kill for. Reliable, thoughtful, always remembering important dates and little details about my life. He brought me coffee in bed on Sunday mornings, listened patiently when I complained about work drama, and never made me feel like I was asking for too much when I needed emotional support. But if I'm being completely honest, there was a part of me that sometimes found his predictability a little boring. He was safe, comfortable, the kind of man you could build a stable life with. But he lacked the edge, the excitement that had characterized some of my previous relationships. I loved him, but I wasn't always sure if I was in love with him, if that makes any sense. Maybe that's why I felt the need to needle him sometimes, to push his buttons, and see if I could get a more passionate reaction out of him. I told myself it was just playful teasing, But looking back, I think I was testing him in ways that weren't fair or healthy. My sister Emma had been staying with us for the past week while she looked for a new apartment after her breakup. She's 2 years younger than me, and we've always been close. Growing up, we shared everything: clothes, secrets, even boyfriends sometimes, though never seriously. She was my best friend, my confidant, the one person in the world I trusted completely. Emma has always been the prettier sister, though I'd never admit that out loud. She has this natural beauty that doesn't require makeup or effort: perfect bone structure, thick hair that always looks effortless, and a body that men notice immediately. I've always had to work harder for attention, but I told myself I was smarter, more driven, more successful in the ways that really mattered. Her recent breakup had been particularly brutal. She'd been with this guy, Marcus, for almost 3 years, and she thought they were heading toward engagement. Instead, he'd blindsided her by moving out while she was at work, leaving nothing but a note saying he needed space to figure himself out. She'd been devastated, crying for days and questioning everything about herself and her worth. I'd been the good sister, offering her our couch, letting her stay as long as she needed, even covering her share of groceries and utilities without complaint. Liam had been supportive too, treating Emma like family and going out of his way to make her feel welcome. Looking back, maybe he was being a little too welcoming, but I was too focused on taking care of my sister to notice. Emma had been staying in our guest room, which was really just a converted office, with a futon and some storage boxes. It wasn't glamorous, but it was private and comfortable enough for a temporary arrangement. She'd been applying for jobs and apartments during the day, trying to get her life back on track after Marcus had destroyed her sense of security. I thought I was being a good sister by opening my home to her during her time of need. I never imagined I was essentially inviting a grenade into my life, one that would explode and take out everything I cared about. The rest of the evening was torture. We all pretended to go back to our previous activities, but the atmosphere had shifted completely. Every attempt at normal conversation felt forced and awkward. Emma excused herself to go to bed early, claiming she had a headache, but I could tell she just wanted to escape the tension I'd created. Liam and I sat in silence for a while after Emma left, both of us staring at our phones instead of addressing what had happened. I kept waiting for him to say something, to yell at me, or demand an apology, or at least acknowledge how hurtful my comment had been. But he just sat there, scrolling through social media like nothing had happened. Finally, I couldn't take the silence anymore. I tried to explain that I'd just been trying to get a rise out of him, that I didn't actually think about his brother in that way. I told him I was sorry if I'd hurt his feelings, though even as I said it, I knew the apology sounded hollow and insincere. He looked up from his phone and gave me the smile that didn't reach his eyes. He said it was fine, that he understood I was just joking around, but something in his tone made my skin crawl. It was too calm, too controlled, like he was working very hard to keep something dangerous locked away. I shrugged it off at the time, figuring he was just being overly sensitive and would get over it by morning. It wasn't like I'd actually meant anything by the comment. I barely knew his brother Ryan beyond the few times we'd met at family gatherings. It was just a thoughtless jab designed to get a reaction, nothing more. But looking back now, I can see that I'd hit him where it hurt most. Liam had always been a little insecure about his brother. Ryan was older, more successful, more confident in social situations. He was the golden child who could do no wrong, while Liam was the younger brother, who always felt like he was living in Ryan's shadow. I'd met Ryan several times at family gatherings, and I'd be lying if I said I hadn't noticed how attractive he was. He had the same basic features as Liam, but somehow wore them with more confidence. Where Liam was careful and thoughtful, Ryan was bold and charismatic. Where Liam asked questions, Ryan made statements. Where Liam sought approval, Ryan assumed he already had it. At family dinners, I'd watched Liam's parents light up when Ryan walked into the room. They hung on his every word, laughed at all his jokes, asked detailed questions about his work and social life. When Liam tried to contribute to the conversation, They listened politely, but without the same enthusiasm. It was subtle, probably unconscious, but the favoritism was unmistakable. Liam had never directly told me how this made him feel, but I'd seen the way his shoulders would tense when Ryan dominated the conversation. I'd noticed how he'd go quiet when his parents praised Ryan's latest promotion or relationship success. I'd felt him withdraw into himself at family gatherings, becoming a spectator to Ryan's performance rather than an active participant in his own family. My comment had probably confirmed every insecurity Liam had ever felt about himself and his place in his family. It wasn't just about sex. It was about worth, about adequacy, about whether he could measure up to the standard his brother had set. I had essentially told him that even in the most intimate aspect of our relationship, I thought his brother would be superior. The cruelty of it hit me as I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling while Liam slept beside me. I had taken his deepest vulnerability and turned it into a weapon to hurt him. I had used his family dynamics, his lifelong feelings of inadequacy, as ammunition for a joke that wasn't even funny. But at the time, I didn't fully grasp the magnitude of what I'd done. I just thought he was being overly sensitive about a throwaway comment. I figured he'd sulk for a day or two, and then we'd move past it like we always did with our little spats. I had no idea that my thoughtless words had awakened something dark and calculating in the man lying next to me. I didn't know that behind his calm exterior, he was already planning the perfect revenge. But at the time, I didn't understand any of that. I just thought he was being dramatic about a silly joke between partners. The next few hours were strange. Liam acted completely normal, like nothing had happened. He kissed me goodnight like always, told me he loved me, even suggested we all go out for brunch the next morning. But something felt off. The way his eyes lingered on me felt different, like a warning I didn't catch. I didn't know that, in his silence, he was already planning his revenge. I fell asleep easily that night, completely unaware of what was brewing. I had no idea that my thoughtless comment had triggered something dark and calculating in the man I trusted with my heart. If I had known what he was capable of, what he was planning to do, I would have packed Emma's bags and gotten her out of that apartment immediately. I woke up around 2 a.m., needing water. The apartment was quiet, and I assumed everyone was asleep. But as I made my way to the kitchen, I noticed that Liam's side of the bed was empty. The sheets were cold, which meant he'd been gone for a while. I figured he was in the kitchen getting a snack or maybe couldn't sleep and was watching TV in the living room. But the living room was empty too, and the kitchen was dark. That's when I heard them, voices, soft and low, coming from the guest room where Emma was staying. At first, I thought maybe she was on the phone with someone, talking quietly so she wouldn't wake us up. Maybe she was talking to a friend about her job search or apartment hunting. But then I heard laughter. Emma's laughter, but different somehow. Intimate, flirty. The kind of laugh she used when she was trying to charm someone, when she was being deliberately seductive. And underneath it, a deeper voice responding, a voice I recognized all too well. My heart started pounding as I crept closer to the guest room door. Every step felt like walking through quicksand, my body moving against my mind's desperate wish to turn around and go back to bed. Part of me didn't want to know what I might find, but I couldn't stop myself from looking. The rational part of my brain kept insisting there had to be an innocent explanation. Maybe Liam couldn't sleep and had gone to check on Emma. Maybe she was having a nightmare, or was upset about her breakup and needed comfort. Maybe they were just talking, being supportive family members in the middle of the night. There had to be a reasonable explanation that didn't involve the two people I trusted most betraying me in the worst possible way. But as I got closer to the door, I could hear more clearly. The voices weren't just talking, they were whispering, murmuring to each other in tones that were unmistakably intimate. I heard Emma's soft gasp, followed by Liam's low chuckle. The sound made my stomach turn because I recognized that chuckle. It was the same one he made when we were being intimate, when he was pleased with himself for making me respond to his touch. The door was slightly ajar, and through the crack, I could see movement in the dim light. shadows shifting on the futon, the outline of two bodies pressed close together. My mind still refused to process what I was seeing, clinging desperately to the hope that this was all some terrible misunderstanding. But then I heard Emma moan his name, soft and breathy, and all hope died. What I saw next will be burned into my memory forever. When I opened that door wider, the sight that greeted me destroyed everything I thought I knew about the two people I loved most in the world. Liam and my sister were tangled in the sheets, his hands exploring her body, with a familiarity that made me physically sick. They were completely absorbed in each other, lost in a passion that made it clear this wasn't some spontaneous moment of weakness. This was deliberate, planned, executed, with the kind of precision that could only come from cold calculation. Emma saw me first, her face going pale with guilt and terror as our eyes met across the room. She tried to pull away from Liam, to cover herself, but he held her there for a moment longer. When he finally turned to look at me, there was no surprise in his expression, no shame or regret. He just stared at me, calm and almost smug, like this was exactly what he'd wanted me to see, like this was the punchline to the joke I thought was harmless. The three of us stayed frozen like that for what felt like an eternity. Emma was crying, trying to form words that wouldn't come. Her face was a mask of guilt and terror, mascara streaking down her cheeks as she clutched the sheet to her chest. She looked like a stranger to me in that moment, this woman who shared my DNA but had somehow become someone I didn't recognize. Liam was watching me with that same cold expression he'd worn earlier in the evening, completely unashamed of his nakedness or what I'd witnessed. There was no surprise in his face, no panic or regret. If anything, he looked satisfied, like he'd been waiting for this moment and was pleased with how it was unfolding. And I was standing there in my pajamas, feeling like my entire world had just collapsed around me. The two people I loved most had destroyed everything we'd built together, and they'd done it in my own home, in the bed I'd provided for my sister's comfort and security. The silence stretched on until I couldn't bear it anymore. My voice came out as barely a whisper when I finally found the words to speak. I asked Emma how she could do this to me, how she could betray me with my own boyfriend in my own home. The question sounded pathetic even to my own ears, like I was begging for an explanation that could somehow make this make sense. But she just kept crying, mumbling apologies that meant nothing in the face of what she'd done. She said she was sorry over and over like a broken record, but the words were empty, meaningless sounds that couldn't undo what I'd witnessed. Liam, on the other hand, was eerily calm. He sat up in the futon, completely comfortable with his nudity, and looked me directly in the eyes. His voice was matter-of-fact when he spoke, like he was discussing the weather rather than the destruction of our relationship. He told me that I'd wondered if his brother would be better in bed, so he thought I might be curious about whether Emma would be better than me. The casual cruelty of his words hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't a moment of passion or weakness. This was calculated revenge, designed specifically to hurt me in the most devastating way possible. He continued talking, explaining his logic with the kind of detached rationality that made my skin crawl. He said that since I seemed to enjoy making comparisons between him and other men, he thought I might appreciate having some basis for comparison myself. He wondered aloud if I thought Emma was more responsive than I was, if she made better sounds, if she was more willing to try new things. Each word was carefully chosen to maximize the damage, to plant images in my mind that I'd never be able to forget. He was systematically destroying not just our relationship, but my sense of self-worth, my trust in my own family, my belief that love meant anything at all. Emma tried to interrupt him, telling him to stop, but he ignored her completely. This was his moment, his chance to deliver the perfect punishment for my thoughtless comment. He was going to savor every second of my humiliation. The coldness in his tone was more shocking than walking in on them together. This wasn't a crime of passion or a moment of weakness brought on by alcohol or emotional vulnerability. This was premeditated cruelty, executed with surgical precision to cause maximum psychological damage. I left the room without another word, my hands shaking as I grabbed my keys and wallet. I couldn't stay in that apartment another second, couldn't breathe the same air as the two people who had just ripped my heart out and stomped on it. I drove around aimlessly for hours, my mind racing as I tried to process what had just happened. How long had this been going on? Had Emma been planning this from the moment she moved in? Or had Liam orchestrated the whole thing as revenge for my stupid comment? The more I thought about it, the more I realized it had to be the latter. Emma might have been willing to betray me, but she wasn't calculating enough to plan something like this. This had Liam's fingerprints all over it, the patience, the precision, the perfect timing designed for maximum impact. He'd probably approached her shortly after my comment, using her vulnerability from her recent breakup to manipulate her into this betrayal. He knew exactly how to hurt me most, and he'd used my own sister as the weapon. When I finally returned to the apartment the next morning, they were both gone. Emma had packed her things and left, probably too ashamed to face me. Her absence felt like another betrayal. Running away instead of staying to face the consequences of what she'd done. The guest room looked like it had been hastily cleaned, the sheets stripped, and the futon folded back into couch position, as if erasing the physical evidence could somehow undo what had happened there. Liam had taken a few of his belongings, but left most of his stuff behind, like he was planning to come back when I wasn't there to collect the rest. His coffee mug was still in the sink, his favorite jacket was still hanging by the door, his books were still scattered on the nightstand. The casual way he'd left these pieces of our shared life behind felt almost as cruel as what he'd done in the guest room. There was a note on the kitchen counter, written in Emma's handwriting. Her words were shaky and smeared, like she'd been crying while she wrote them. She said she was sorry, that she never meant for it to happen, that she knew she'd destroyed our relationship and might never be able to fix it. She promised to stay away and give me space to process everything. The note went on for 2 pages, full of excuses and explanations that only made me angrier. She claimed that Liam had told her our relationship was already over, that I'd been talking about wanting to see other people. She said she'd been drinking and wasn't thinking clearly, that she'd regretted it immediately, but it was too late to take it back. She wrote about how guilty she felt, how she knew she'd destroyed the most important relationship in her life for one night of meaningless sex. She begged me to eventually forgive her, promising she'd do anything to earn back my trust. But her words felt hollow, self-serving, focused more on her own guilt than on the pain she'd caused me. I knew that anyone I told would ask what I'd said to provoke such extreme retaliation. They'd want to know what kind of comment could justify such cruel revenge. And when I told them, I could already imagine their reactions, the pause, the uncomfortable silence, the subtle shift in their sympathy as they realized I wasn't entirely innocent in this situation. That one comment cost me my relationship, my family, and my pride in a single night. I wanted to scream, wanted to rage against the unfairness of it all, but all I could do was laugh bitterly at the irony, because deep down, I knew this disaster had started with me. My stupid joke had revealed something ugly in all 3 of us. It had exposed Liam's capacity for calculated cruelty, Emma's willingness to betray her own sister, and my own thoughtless ability to wound the people I claimed to love. Now I'm alone in an apartment that feels too big and too quiet, surrounded by the ghosts of relationships that died because I couldn't keep my mouth shut. I keep replaying that moment, wishing I could take back those words, wishing I'd seen the warning signs in Liam's silence. But it's too late for wishes. The damage is done, and I'm left to rebuild my life from the wreckage of one thoughtless comment. The man I loved is gone, my sister is a stranger, and I'm forced to confront the ugly truth that sometimes the cruelest betrayals are the ones we bring upon ourselves.